Oh, Dr. Shamaji. When I am in a Western country and I dress in a sari, people ask me, "Are you a Hindu?" Well, I say I am interested in Hinduism. So they say, "Are you interested in a religion where
widows are burned, right? Yeah, right.
where widows are burned?" What is this Sati?
Sati, the word has two meanings. It means the person, the widow, who burns herself at the funeral pyre of the husband, the person, and also the rite by which she does it. So, the earliest evidence of sati we have goes back to the time of Alexander's invasion of India. And from then onwards, we have literary and epigraphic evidence of its prevalence. It's very hard to calculate how widespread the practice was. It was abolished by Governor General Bentinck in 1829. It had also been abolished even earlier by at least one Indian state.
But what was it voluntary?
Well, in principle, it has always been voluntary. And involuntary sati is the same as murder. The subtler question is, if from your childhood this is held up before you as an ideal, and this was especially so in the warrior classes, then can it be really considered voluntary? You could say that the person has been brainwashed. But one becomes a bit cautious in claiming that somebody has been brainwashed because it denies any sense of agency on the part of the person committing the act. And as I mentioned earlier, not all widows were expected to commit sati, nor did they commit sati. But there is clear evidence that some cases, maybe in later times in many cases, people were virtually coerced or shamed into doing it. But that is clearly homicide. What people find hard to believe in the modern world is that somebody would voluntarily wish to do it in earlier times. Just as in a future world in which there are no wars, people will wonder how in earlier times people sacrifice their lives for the sake of a nation, for the sake of fighting for a nation.
So if a woman commits sati, why doesn't a man commit sati?
Yeah, in our gender inclusive times, this will be a very natural question. But in earlier times, a distinction was made between the public and the private sphere of life. So the warrior gave evidence of his bravery and loyalty by dying on the battlefield for his master. And the wife gave proof of her bravery and loyalty by committing sati in the private sphere.
So, if a woman is forced to commit sati, it is murder. But why should people be upset if she does it on her own?
Well, I think people are upset because they think that although it seems that she did it on her own, she really did not do it on her own. This could be one reason. But I think in the case of the Christian opposition to sati, there is something subtler at work. A subtler theological force is at work. Because the sati subconsciously comes to be viewed as a rival to Jesus Christ. This might seem strange on the face of it, but consider this. The sati dies for the sins of somebody else and is supposed to confer blessings on the future generations and the past generations as well, and saves them from sin. Jesus Christ did the same thing. He died for the sake of others and saved them from sin. Moreover, the sati is a woman and Jesus Christ was a man. So one could suspect that two forces are at work here. Christian exclusivism, that only Jesus can be a savior, according to Christianity, and Christian male chauvinism, that only men can be saviors. Otherwise, it is hard to explain the need, what is the right word for it? The visceral reaction of Christians, especially Christian missionaries. And it is important that we have to keep Christian missionaries in mind, who were behind spreading word about it, especially in England.
Kindly explain this comparison more to me, please.
Yeah, you see, remember we mentioned in our earlier discussions that the one God, the Christian God, is the jealous God. And so there could be an element of sati envy in the reaction of the Christian missionaries, especially to the phenomenon of sati, where they probably subconsciously perceive the sati as a rival to Jesus. One might say that the sati was brainwashed into committing the act because of the time she was living in. Maybe, but one could similarly argue that Jesus was brainwashed. He was a Jew living in the expectancy of a Messiah. So there is no end to that kind of argument. And the sati is a mini Christ in this way. And of course, another problem here, from a Christian point of view, there are many satis, but there is only one Jesus Christ. So there also it challenges the uniqueness of the Christian concept of Christ. So the vehemence and persistence with which Sati was criticized in its times, and the way the issue has been kept alive in Christian countries, and the Christian discourse about Hinduism, and the way it has been kept alive in the modern discourse about Hinduism in the West, in my view, calls for an explanation beyond the purely historical.